Welcome to the Best Little Town Podcast, your go-to source for everything happening in the town of Bedford's local government. Whether it's new initiatives or important decisions shaping our town's future, you'll hear it right here. This podcast is dedicated to keeping our residents informed and engaged.
Hello, this is Bart Warner, Bedford Town Manager, welcoming you to the August 27th, 2025 edition of the Best Little Town Podcast. This is a communication effort in cooperation with our media partners at Media Squatch to provide information about town business and activities, particularly in light of town council meetings. Of course, we record this the day after every council meeting, and that means we met last night on Tuesday, August the 26th. Start with, we had a very good crowd, a lot of people in attendance, which was greatly appreciated. We start every meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, and just talking to Mayor Stanley this morning about this, there was such a crowd, and the people participated in the pledge with such fervor that there was kind of a reverb within the council chamber that was really touching. And CG said he had meant to mention that last night, but in the course of all the business that we discussed, which we'll get to momentarily, kind of got past him. But again, in their council comments, all the members mentioned how much they appreciate when people show up. But again, that the Pledge of Allegiance last night in particular, where, you know, everybody was there of one accord, was a rather moving moment. So we thank folks for coming and allowing us to experience that. Jumping into the agenda, Councilman Dave Foster had an out-of-town obligation last night, but had requested to attend by remote means. I would say Zoom. I don't know if that's copyrighted, but either way, he participated remotely. Council has to approve that activity, and based on Dave's medical reasons, he had a family issue down in Florida, they did unanimously approve his attendance by virtual means. Jumping into the agenda again, the minutes from the previous meeting were approved. In my report last night, I had a few things to mention, beginning with the fact that we have been experiencing several problems and issues with the municipal building, particularly the air conditioning and electrical systems. Many components related to these issues are original to the structure, which has been continuously operated for over 55 years. In our efforts to prolong their function, we are now encountering difficulties such as discontinued and obsolete parts. This is leading us to consider significant renovation activity. We are in the process of assessing contingencies and their related costs. And as a result of those discussions, I did ask council to add a discussion item to the new business agenda later in the meeting to go into further detail. Also reported that the repair work on the drainage issue on Railroad Avenue has commenced, is scheduled to continue for a period of 7 days, although we had reports from our contractor that they're making very good progress, have identified the source of the issue, in particular the collapsed pipe, and are kind of a little bit ahead of schedule, but we don't want to get too excited until it's actually finished. The primary adverse effect is on the private parking within the vicinity of 620 Railroad Avenue. So the residents of the apartments there, we apologize for the inconvenience and appreciate your patience. I was pleased to report that once again, the town of Bedford has been awarded a Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting by the Government Finance Officers Association, and I passed along my personal thanks and recognition to Ann Cantrell and all members of the Finance Department in particular for this recognition. On a purely administrative note, but of interest to the public, the Bedford County Board of Supervisors recently changed the date and time of their regular meetings beginning in September in a manner that directly conflicts with town council meetings. Bedford County Board of Supervisors beginning in September will meet on the second and fourth Tuesdays of every month at 7:00 p.m. Coincidentally, we had been having some discussions internally about changing the date and frequency of town council meetings. In light of the county's actions, we are exploring the possibility of town council moving toward one monthly meeting to take place on the third Tuesday of each month. To pursue that, that would require a formal amendment of Section 2-27 of the Town Code, and that is something that's likely to be discussed further. I'll give a little bit more background. We do meet on the second and fourth Tuesdays currently, but we'd like to avoid that conflict with the county to ensure that all our citizens have the opportunity to engage their elected officials. But also the two monthly meetings traditionally in November and December don't take place because of holiday considerations. I can tell you in the month of November this year, the second Tuesday is the Veterans Day holiday, and the fourth Tuesday is the week of Thanksgiving. So we were already kind of looking at having one meeting on the third Tuesday. We expect to take this up again beginning in September and trying to get that taken care of expeditiously for the convenience mainly of our citizens, to make sure they have access to all the public bodies that they want to address. And on that note, in reference to holidays, I mentioned that town offices will be closed on Monday, September 1st, in observance of the Labor Day holiday. The next item on the agenda was appearances before council, which we had several last night, beginning with Pastor John Sines, who offered prayer for the council members and community in general. Next was Steve Rush, who is president of the Bedford International Alliance. Steve provided some background information on BIA, its mission, and its activities, and also reported that they participated in a recent trip to Normandy and presented a gift to the town from an organization in Normandy recognizing the sacrifice of the community and the Bedford boys in particular. Next was Jeremy Chapman, who rose to speak about issues at the farmers market. Again, there have been some concerns about potential activity that may be troublesome, such as loitering, and also the town's response by posting signage, which contains language directly from the town code. Mr. Chapman stated that he has personally not witnessed any trouble or poor behavior, requested that we keep the farmers market area open to the greatest extent possible for the people, and noted that he is a longtime resident. Next, Miss Nikki Clark spoke and advised that she is a walker and enjoys going all around town and frequently stops in the farmers market to take a break and sit, and in so doing has met a variety of people, and she just very much enjoys that opportunity. Stephen Blizzard, a resident of Bedford for 24 years, then rose to speak. He expressed his desire for the town to take down the current signs, which again reference the full provisions of the town code, including the possibility of prosecution. He noted he also uses the market to rest when he's walking from his home, and he also assists in the shower ministry that takes place in an adjacent property nearby. He noted his observation that people use the shelter as a passive place to shelter themselves from sun and rain weather conditions. Tim Brooke then rose to speak. He offered prayer for council and followed up from previous comments that he made at our meeting that took place on August 12th. He noted that the signs have not been taken down per his request and requested that council pursue doing so in an expeditious manner. Robert Garnica, a resident of Burks Hill Road, advised that he's lived here for a couple of years. He enjoys the market area and does not want to see it go bad, particularly the welcoming environment, due to the signage that is posted. Next, Mr. Rick Reynolds rose to speak. He noted that he was born and raised in Bedford. He stopped to use the restroom at the farmer's market recently and noticed that it was locked. He also expressed concern about the language of the signs and the inference that, or the suggestion that he could not purchase a meal and eat it or enjoy the meal at picnic tables without being cited for loitering. He mentioned our marketing campaigns to promote the town and our reference to the identity as the world's best little town, and wanted to know how we can fix the language of the signs that may contradict that message. Next was Jennifer Cohn. Jennifer owns the Little Hour Flower Farm and serves as a vendor for the actual farmers market events. She noted that the current signs that are the subject of concern are basically located right over the slot that they occupy during the market. Ms. Cohn advised that she did not want to completely get rid of signage and that there were some issues related to some activities that do need to be addressed, but we need to find a way to not undo the nature of it being a friendly and a family-friendly in particular place, and having language that potentially alienates people is problematic. Sorry to stumble. I'm trying to read my own handwriting. She did note that the farmers market, in her opinion, is a community place that deserves respect. Next speaker was Wilson Brown, who is the rector of St. John's Episcopal Church. He drove by the market today and shared his impression that it's a site that radiates warmth and hospitality, but his concern is that the signs are somewhat aggressive and threatening, and they discourage people from hanging out. He also noted the slogans we use promoting the positive attributes of our town, and in his opinion, these spot signs currently are too aggressive and communicate an alternative message, which is that we want to keep people out. He also expressed concern that this impacts the most vulnerable, that the homeless population typically do not have places to be or to go, and there ought to be a better way to address this issue in changing the signs, removing the signs, or identifying some other alternative. The next speaker was Christopher Carey, who noted that he's lived in Bedford all his life. The market has been something that he has long enjoyed. He shared his view that there may be some people from outside of the community who may be causing problems with regard to poor behavior and the homelessness situation. He suggested that the loitering language on the sign could be amended, but also asked people to take into account the problems surrounding Bedford. Oftentimes, the problems with poor behavior are the result of people coming here from outside, not local residents. He noted that we do need to keep a standard in terms of behavioral expectations and code requirements, but suggested that we find a way to change the language on the signs in a way that makes sense. Next speaker was Herman Evans, who basically advised that he is at the market every day. He volunteers at the warming shelter and in Christian ministries. He shared his view that most people he encounters just want to sit and eat at the tables at the market. He has not personally observed any criminal activity, and he noted that we are blessed that we don't have the problems of other places. He also requested that we make a change to the language of the sign. The next speaker under appearances before council was Winston Burks. Mr. Burks noted that he has been a resident of Bedford for 37 years. He had not had a lot of contact with the homeless population until he started volunteering recently at the warming shelter. He shared his experience and his family's experience of sleeping and spending time overnight with homeless people, and shared his observation that it's not a dangerous crowd. He encouraged empathy, noting that the lives of these people are hard and that shooing them away does not make the problem go away, but in fact makes things a little bit harder when they are already hard for these individuals. And with that, the appearances before council section of the agenda was complete. We then moved forward with council comments. Councilman Jay Ippolito thanked everyone in attendance, and particularly all the speakers during the appearances before council, and noted that council has certainly heard what was said last night. Councilman Todd Foreman echoed the comments, welcoming people and thanking them for their attendance. Councilman Stacy Haley expressed his thanks for the prayers that were offered, both by Reverend Sines, but also by Tim Brooke, and I failed to mention that Mr. Herman Evans also opened his comments with a prayer for the community. He stated that he had listened to people talking about the market and shared his view that there were some issues and events that led to the signs being posted that some people find offensive currently. He shared his view that there have been some things going on that people did not see, and that there had been some issues of vandalism that are documented by police reports. He did share his view that the language of the sign certainly can be adjusted based on the feedback we received, but also wanted to make it clear from his point of view that people were aware that these signs were posted in response to requests for action and to things that had happened in the past. Councilman Dwight Evans thanked everyone in attendance, noted that he does listen and takes into consideration the comments. Of course, he noted his view that council's role is to make decisions based on the community as a whole. Sometimes those are not agreeable to everyone, and sometimes they raise questions about the precise details. He did share some positive comments about the recent Bedford Town Carnival / County Fair, which took place at Liberty Lake Park this past weekend, and also expressed his thanks to Bedford County for installing the new pickleball facility at their park facility, which they own and operate on Bedford Avenue in the middle of town. Councilman Dave Foster gave a shout out to Ann Cantrell and the finance crew for the award they received from the Government Finance Officers Association and shared his view of their excellent performance in general. Vice Mayor Updike thanked everyone in attendance, also expressed his thanks to Ann Cantrell and the finance staff. He repeated some further positive comments that he had received about the county fair, shared his observation that it was well run and well maintained, and expressed specific thanks to all the speakers who shared prayer for the council and the community. Mayor C.G. Stanley concluded council comments with his portion. He thanked the pastors and all the additional prayers. He noted that he had attended the pickleball dedication of the county's facility the previous week and commented that it is a fast-growing sport and noted his experience with it in traveling and observing it as he goes in various places for his personal recreational uses. He noted that he attended the county fair with his oldest grandchildren this past weekend. They had a great deal of fun. He advised that he will get feedback from staff regarding the impacts on our facilities, but in his view, it appears to have been a successful event. He thanked Steve Rush, who incidentally is also a former mayor of Bedford, for presenting the gift from the folks in France. And he also congratulated Ann Cantrell on the achievement recognition by GFOA. CG then spoke to the sign issues, and he noted that perhaps the language is a bit harsh. He noted the opinions of the people who perceive it to be that way and suggested that it should be evaluated. He appreciated the concerns and compassion expressed for others and generally the community positive comments and the way that people have presented their points of view. He shared his view that the intent of the signs was never to discourage ministry activities or any services to the homeless, but rather it was an attempt to address direct complaints from businesses about some after-hour activities and some direct comments that have been received in previous council meetings during appearances before council. The sign is essentially an enforcement tool. Again, a lot of times our police department, given the limitations on their ability to do their work, sometimes we have to do things like post signs such as no trespassing and no loitering, which frankly do not communicate a friendly message, but are necessary to allow us to enforce the laws, particularly trespassing on private property. CG indicated we want to strike the right balance to allow things to continue, but also to provide a safe space. The next item of business was revisions to the agenda, and there were a couple. We did rearrange agenda items a bit to allow the Liberty High School student body president to present ahead of the public hearing, and also to add an item of new business regarding discussion of municipal building issues. With that said, the next item of business was a request to close streets from Liberty High School. The Liberty High School Student Council Association requested that council authorize the closing of College Street, Peak Street, Bridge Street, and Main Street on Wednesday, October 8th, 2025 for the annual homecoming parade, which is scheduled to begin at 5:30 p.m. on that date. Present to make the request was Miss Victoria Coles, who is the current SCA president, and she formally presented the request, noting the details and the history of the event, and did an excellent job and was very eloquent in her remarks. On a motion by Dwight Evans, seconded by Vice Mayor Updike, the request to close streets was unanimously approved. And again, the Liberty High School Homecoming Parade will take place Wednesday, October 8th, beginning at 5:30 p.m. The next item of business on the agenda was a public hearing dealing with the electric rate tariff proposal that has been formulated by a third-party consultant, staff, and council, and has been published. The beginning of the public hearing was occupied by Mr. Bart Krebs, who was with Raftellus. They are the third-party consultant who we engaged to evaluate our current electric rates, our current financial situation, trends in the market, and trends in the operation in general, and also some potential proposals to address those. Mr. Krebs gave a presentation as part of the hearing, which provided a great deal of information. We are posting that presentation separately online on our website at www.bedfordva.gov. If you'd like to receive a hard copy of that, that's also a possibility. You can contact me directly. I have that. My email is bwarner@bedfordva.gov. Again, I'm not going to attempt to recap all the information that Mr. Krebs shared. We would encourage you, if you were not present and did not watch the live stream, to either go back and watch the video on YouTube or to obtain that information directly from the website now or a written copy from our staff. The next speaker in the public hearing was Nancy Layton, who identified herself as a resident of Peak Street. She shared her observation that we have seen a number of increases in customer electric costs over the last few years. She appreciated the facts of the study, but stated that it does not help her personal bottom line, and also noted that the price cost adjustment every 6 months is also a burden for town electric rate taxpayers. She also noted that on the rare occasion that the PCA actually decreases, that those decreases are exceptionally small and rare. The next speaker was Tim Brook, who is a resident of Randolph Street. He thanked John Wagner for the job he performs in keeping the power on, and shared his opinion that if Mr. Wagner thinks he needs an increase in rates, then he should be given the tools to get the job done. The next speaker was Mr. Rick Reynolds, a resident of Southgate Drive. He asked Mayor Stanley about his previous experience as an employee with the town electric department. Mr. CG advised that he had worked for a couple of years for the town before he went off to serve in the Air Force in his younger days. Mr. Reynolds also noted that he has seen several contractors driving around town doing some work, and his understanding was that this was work that was being done on behalf of the electric department. John Wagner was able to interject and noted that there are several communication companies doing work in town in an effort to expand their services that are available to consumers, most notably Comcast and Zytel. Some of these companies, we know who they are by name, and we can share that information if people have questions about certain contractors, but these people are being engaged by those companies, and they are being paid by those companies, not the town. In fact, the infrastructure that they are installing is specific to the services that those companies are providing, and they are not town contractors. Wait just a moment as the train goes by, because it's distracting me. Our next speaker was Tim Black, who's a resident of Mountain Avenue. Of course, Tim is also a former mayor of Bedford, and shared his perspective that he is intimately involved with the cost structure of the utility. He was glad to have an independent assessment of this situation by Raftellus. Shared his view that we're basically facing a nationwide issue driving the cost of electricity upwards. He suggested that we post the presentation by Raftelis so people would be able to look at it on the website. He also encouraged council to seek ways to minimize such a big hit. Part of the presentation indicated an average increase of 17% for residential customers in their costs. Mr. Black noted that a lot of people will struggle with that and suggested that there ought to be a way to break the increases up into two parts, perhaps recovering 60 to 75% of the cost up front and then seeing what those impacts are, which would give people time to better adjust. Tim acknowledged that he knows that we have used cash to delay this as long as we could, and he thinks that all citizens would appreciate any effort to ease the impact on individual bills. Our next speaker, unfortunately, I did not understand her last name, but I think her name is Ann, who's a resident of Clearview Road, expressed her view that she understands that this is a national problem and in particular a state problem due to the growth of data centers. In Virginia, we are not keeping up with demand and costs are being passed on to us. Unfortunately, this has a larger effect on senior citizens who are on a fixed income. She suggested that we seek provisions to provide relief to the greatest extent possible to offset those impacts and ask council to reach out to the state and federal government to demand more generation of energy to offset this issue. The next speaker was Mary Reynolds, who shared her opinion that the consultant report was okay, but asked the town to go beyond what the consultants have said, suggested that we reduce our funding of capital costs and seek new ways to address things. Also suggested that we dive further into our cash reserves to offset the impact. The 17.2% increase presented by the consultant, she said she understood, but that implementing that all at once would have a significant impact, particularly on our unsheltered community. The last speaker during the public hearing was Mr. David Thomas, who was a resident of, well, Dave didn't give his address, and I know where Dave lives, but it's just gone right out of my head, so I apologize. Mr. Thomas shared his view that the electric department has done an excellent job of restoring service on the occasions when we have outages. If we have to undertake this rate increase, he did want to make sure to commend the efforts of the electric department. And he shared his view that we have been cheaper in terms of our rates than any of the other utilities around us. That concluded the public hearing. The next item was new business, and the first item was a discussion of the proposed electric rate tariff for fiscal year 26. We outlined the procedural issues that led us to that discussion last night and how we have arrived here. And there basically was a robust discussion about the proposal. Essentially, there was an ordinance presented for consideration to adopt the recommendations of the consultant Raftelis and to implement those. There was a motion made by Mayor Stanley to adopt that ordinance, seconded by Vice Mayor Updike. Again, there was considerable discussion by council about the concerns, particularly impacts on citizens and residents and customers, also recounting the history of what's led us to this point. John Wagner, the electric director, offered some input as well, noted he particularly is very concerned about the impact on customers, and also provided some very specific details related to the increase in costs. Also noting that, in fact, we have underfunded capital significantly, and we are already in a situation where we have been using cash reserves to offset these impacts. As part of the discussion, Councilman Stacey Haley offered an amended motion to recover half of the recommended costs at this time and to defer the costs later to assess their impacts. That motion was seconded by Councilman Jay Ippolito. The discussion of that basically led to the fact that since we have not been recovering our costs, we have already experienced a decrease in our cash position down to about $8 million, I think is what was reported. If we continue to do that, we could be facing a loss of as much as $1 million by the time we would address it again in January. And that would be the height of the winter peak season, which would have also an impact anyway. The amended motion presented by Mr. Haley and seconded by Mr. Ippolito failed on a vote of 5 members against, 2 members for. Voting against the amended motion were Councilman Evans, Councilman Foreman, Councilman Foster, Mayor Stanley, and Vice Mayor Updike. Voting for the amended motion were Councilman Haley and Councilman Ippolito. Discussion then centered back on the original motion, which was to consider adoption of the ordinance as presented. Again, after much discussion, I would encourage people to watch the video and expressions of regret and concern. That motion was approved by a vote of 5 members in favor, 2 members against. Councilman Evans, Councilman Foreman, Councilman Foster, Mayor Stanley, and Vice Mayor Updike voted for the motion. Councilman Haley and Councilman Ippolito voted against. The next item of discussion related to a Vietnam Veterans Memorial, which is being installed on the grounds of the Bedford County Courthouse, with a dedication ceremony scheduled to take place on Saturday, November 22nd. In anticipation of that event and installation of the memorial itself, members of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Board have been inquiring about the possibility of changes to the site, including elimination of on-street parking spaces in front of the location of the memorial. Mr. Doug Berry spoke on behalf of the board and indicated that basically there are currently 2 parking spaces that are located directly in front of the location of the memorial, which would block it from view, and he requested some relief of that. Councilman Todd Foreman made a motion to allow modification to the parking in that area to either eliminate 1 space or to provide enough space to provide a direct line of sight to the memorial. That motion was seconded by Councilman Stacey Haley and was unanimously approved. The last item of new business was the added item discussion of the municipal building. As I had reported to council previously, we have kind of been nursing along our systems in a building that was built in 1968. In particular, the air conditioning system, which was state of the art 57 years ago, has had problems coming up for at least the last 10 to 15 years. And we've noted that within the last 8 years, we have spent $900,000 on parts and repairs just to keep the existing system going. We recently had a situation where we had a main breaker trip, and that affected 3 other breakers in our old system that required us to close the municipal building on the Friday before last. This outage occurred at 9:30 in the morning, and we did not recover our systems till 3:30 p.m. We do have a proposal to install a temporary fix that would cost about $250,000 and is warranted for 1 to 3 years. But given the amount of money that we've thrown at this situation already, we suggested that that only buys us a few more years, and we'd likely be spending that amount of money again in addition to the $900,000 that we've already spent. So we asked for council's consensus to proceed with an alternative that unfortunately would include the issuance of a line of credit. Currently in the general fund, the town pays debt service of about $212,000 a year. That was scheduled to go away in 2028. But given the need to perform this work at the municipal building, we're exploring the possibility of borrowing up to $2.5 million, which would keep that debt service payment at its current level, but unfortunately for a period of 20 years. So I'm particularly frustrated by that because I was excited about the idea of being debt-free in the general fund for at least a year or two, if not longer. But given the impacts on the systems in the municipal building, it's affecting operations and also costing more money that we have to address. So as part of that effort, we will be looking at the air conditioning systems as well as the electric system, the windows, which were original to the building and not terribly efficient, and also the potential relocation of some heat-sensitive IT equipment, and even the possibility of maybe an expansion of the building to address some of the space concerns expressed by the police department. Again, we've identified the fact that for the current level of debt service, we could borrow about $2.5 million. So we're going to have to do some cost engineering and budgeting to see how we can address all those needs separately. But the main consideration at this point is the air conditioning system. Council did provide us with the authority to go ahead and pursue those discussions, and we will be presenting more information as we go forward. Final item of business was a closed session to discuss town-owned property outside town limits in the Peaks Magisterial District of Bedford County. We'll tell you that's been an ongoing issue. There's been some questions about ownership of property adjacent to the Stoney Creek Reservoir, which is owned and operated by the Bedford Regional Water Authority. We have been in discussions with the Water Authority to resolve those issues. And particularly, there's been some basic ownership questions as well as some questions about deed restrictions. And we've been talking back and forth with the members of the Water Authority Board, and there was further discussion of that in closed session last night. Council came out of closed session and did not take any further action other than to adjourn the meeting until 6:00 p.m. on Tuesday, September 9th, at which time we will have a work session dealing with the proposed downtown strategic plan. Again, thank you very much for your time and attention and listening to this podcast. We also always appreciate the input and the understanding of our citizens, and we certainly appreciate the level of civil discourse that takes place here and the mutual respect that we see amongst citizens and that which is displayed towards council and staff. One of the great things about Bedford, in addition to its natural beauty, is the beauty of its people and our ability to share grace with one another and work together to identify differing points of view, but to try to reach consensus in moving forward. So certainly something we don't take for granted. And as a resident here, it's not something I take for granted, and certainly something I appreciate personally. So until next time, I plan to join you again on this podcast, God willing, on Wednesday, September 10th, to provide details of the September 9th meeting. In the meantime, we hope everyone experiences good health as back-to-school season approaches, that all is well with students and their families. And we very much appreciate you joining us and your interest in living in the world's best little town.